Hello there, my fellow thinkers and dreamers. This is Mind Palace Musings, and I am your host, David Wellman. In the last episode, we took a rather grim topic and talked about death and how it is our ultimate birthright. In this episode, let's talk about humanity's fear of death and our endless quest to delay it and eventually eliminate it. I am talking about humanity's age-old quest for immortality. No one wants to die. As mentioned, humanity has been searching for immortality since time immemorial. It's our fundamental lack of understanding regarding death that fuels this goal, because it's in our nature to be afraid of things we just don't understand. I think immortality could potentially end up being a mistake. So, without further ado, let's get into today's topic. Immortality is an impending calamity. A few quick assumptions for today's episode. We're all gonna die one day. None of this non-zero chance that I'm immortal shit from the last episode, even though I do think it's very fun. It is very fun to think that since I, or you, the listener, have not yet died, there's a non-zero chance that we won't. But, no, we're all dying. Okay. On that note, humans are never going to stop trying to find immortality, and I think it's safe to assume that if we survive climate collapse and nuclear war, we're probably going to find immortality one day. So, let's get started. As mentioned in the start, humanity has been searching for immortality for literally forever. In a weird way, we've actually kind of found it throughout the years, in a sense that as society advances, as medicine gets better, as our understanding of the body and diseases and aging gets better, we seem to be pushing the date of our death further back. We are increasing the longevity of our species. We used to have a very low life expectancy as a species in general, be it because death during childbirth was quite frequent, and any kind of what we would call a minor disease today would pretty much kill you back in the day. So beyond that, we've also had philosophers and mystics and sorcerers and magicians and witches and all manner of practitioners trying to find the secrets of eternal youth or some magical elixir. Unless it's happened and it's just a very well-kept secret, none of that really happened, you know. You can't really snort elephant tusk powder to get an extra year on your life. That hasn't stopped people from trying and continuing to do it to this day, and it's fucking disgusting. But anyway, the point is, we are shit scared of death, and we are never going to stop trying to avoid it. And I don't blame people. We want to live longer, we want to experience more, we want more days in the sun and talking to loved ones and laughing with friends. And while I think the goal is noble, I don't necessarily think that's the outcome we'll get. But we will get there. So, what do we currently have in terms of immortality? Well, we have a form of genetic immortality as we pass down our genes. As long as our children aren't removed from the gene pool, we live on through them, in a way. Some parents take this far too literally and fuck up their kids trying to live vicariously through them. I'm sorry. I I know the pain. Not personally, but I know the pain. And this is the meaning of life. On a biological standpoint, it's to survive long enough to reproduce. That's basically the whole point of life from a naturalist standpoint. That's also, I think, why we need to look into immortality, because in general, our bodies are not meant to last that long. We get old, we decay, we only have one set of teeth, and our brains are just waiting for some horrifying mental illnesses to swoop in and eat away at them. But anyway, another way to live forever is through your legacy. We know of names like Caesar, Cleopatra, Diogenes, Da Vinci, Genghis Khan, and Buddha, and so on. As their legacy lives on and their ideas ripple through time, they will likely live on forever in our information space and through our storage media and the cloud of human consciousness. At least one person will always have them in their mind. When someone is truly forgotten, that's when they are truly dead. And perhaps this is why we have forms of ancestor worship and burial ceremonies and the like, because we want our ancestors to live on in our hearts and minds. We pay remembrance to them so that they aren't forgotten, in the same hopes that when we pass on, those that are left will do the same for us, and we can cling on to that final thread. Finally, humans are data mongers. We look to store and preserve anything and everything. And in the modern day, your digital footprint and pictures and everything else you've put online, and even things you haven't put online, thanks Facebook, they'll outlast you and likely stay on a server or cloud somewhere well after you're dead. So immortality doesn't necessarily mean that we are consciously living through our infinite span of years that we have, but could also just refer to our legacy passing on. But that's kind of boring. If you're immortal, you want to live long enough to take trips to Saturn and find out what other fruits they have on other green planets. So that's kind of the goal we're going for. One way we can live long enough to leave this planet and see the edges of the universe, which again I think is rather optimistic, but we will get there. So let's actually talk about immortality and the future of it. We currently have two main problems. One is that we either die to natural means, and the other is to unnatural means. Natural death would include biological death, clinical death, and brain death, which Wikipedia tells me are all different things, which kind of makes sense. We can die due to old age, with our cells making mistakes in duplication as they replicate as we get older, as we're exposed to radiation and the sun, which is also radiation. Anyway, as we age, our bodies decay. Our organs can also fail with or without reason, even in those considered to be young and healthy. And beyond that, even our brains aren't safe from the ravages of time, as we can be taken by mental illness or just a complete loss of brain function. And of course, the absolute ravager of complex multicellular creatures, cancer. In this case, entropy is the enemy. Unnatural death comes as a result of us being mortal. And this is an interesting tangent I'm going to go on. When you think of immortality in fantasy settings, you've got the elegant elves that will live forever, but they can still die to external means. They can still get, hit with arrows and have their heads chopped off with swords. So solving aging kind of turns us into elves of fantasy novels. It lets us live forever, but we are still completely vulnerable to accidental deaths. So even if we solve aging, we still have to solve for being in squishy flesh bodies and living in a world dictated by chaos. Accidents can always happen, and mere seconds can be the difference between life and death. We also have caloric requirements to keep living and an innate need for oxygen. These are the problems we have to solve if we want to be truly immortal. Research is currently being done to solve or eliminate aging, cancer, and mental illness. And I think we'll get there through combinations of stem cells, 3D printing, neomaterials, and nanotechnology. And this is how we can keep our bodies young and healthy forever. For example, you could have nanobots slowly replace every cell in your body with synthetic ones that are imperceptible to the originals, but better. And these nanobots would never go away. They would constantly be performing maintenance much better than our cells ever could. At this point, are we still considered human? We are still us, but not really, because we've replaced every single cell in our bodies with a duplicate. The only thing that really is still us is our consciousness, as you could replace every brain cell one at a time so that you don't have to ever shut off normal brain functions. This is why transhumanism is such an interesting topic, because at one point, do you stop being human? I don't know. Maybe that's a discussion for another episode in the future. So, yeah, in these new synthetic bodies, we might even throw away our needs for food and breathing, because we can just get energy from the sun and have passive breathing that fills our lungs without us needing to breathe. Why even have lungs when you can just pump oxygen straight where it needs to go from the outside? Actually, I think that's how insects breathe, and there's a reason why insects aren't really that big anymore, because there's not enough oxygen content in the air. Okay, fine, we probably still need to breathe, but I'm sure we can do it in a more sophisticated way. And you could probably also remove much of our nutrient needs, as at this point you can just either have them produced in the body or administered through some kind of super multivitamins. So, yeah, why stop there? We've got synthetic bodies now. We can probably also replace the skull and the bones with something much harder and safer. If you've got a brain in some kind of advanced titanium, let's say, roll cage, it's probably not that easy then for an accidental death. It kind of acts like your brain has been encased in an airplane's black box. Even if you fall down a ravine, they can probably find your brain still, and you'd still be alive. If your brain's in a separate casing, it could probably be removed from the body and kept somewhere more secure with the perfect temperature and chemical composition. Then you don't even need a body, and you could probably remotely control one. This is kind of explored in... There's a movie called... I went and looked it up. The movie is called Surrogates. And in this movie, humans don't really go outside anymore. They stay inside these pods all day, which allows them to control an external body that they basically treat like toys, and they don't really care if they get destroyed, because who cares? The controller's still alive. Now, just imagine that in this case, you are no longer a human because you are a brain in a jar. Which, again, transhumanism argument, am I still human if I'm just a brain in a jar? Maybe. So, why keep living in the physical world then? We've put our brains safely in some vault that is going to survive for millennia. Why not just live inside of VR? We could then no longer be constrained by physical limitations. Everything's been handled for us. Life becomes unbearably boring, and we put ourselves into a simulation that has a bit of excitement. Maybe dictators and wars, disease, plagues, tensions, a climate crisis or two, and now we've reached the simulation argument again. Have we already solved immortality? Is this world that we call reality just a VR simulation that we are continually cycling through because real life is just boring? There's nothing left for us. We are brains in jars. Perhaps the control was taken away from us so long ago. Some kind of dystopian government state that promised to keep us all safe, and they kept their word by putting us in jars in this VR simulation to suffer forever for our hubris of thinking we could all outlive the gods. Maybe, I don't know, it's a fun thought. So, why do I keep saying that immortality might be a mistake? Well, humans are corruptible. Now, imagine that we've got humans that can live forever. Vampires are always seen as evil, malicious creatures who see humans as little more than cattle as they live forever in their castles drinking blood to stay young and alive forever. And this is already happening with the elites getting blood and bone marrow transfusions from the young, hoping it will keep them young as well, which it might actually help. I didn't actually read up on it. I just know it's something that rich people are doing at the moment. These same elites have a vested interest in keeping the rest of society under their boot. They are the 1% and they want to stay the 1%. Immortality may be kept for the elite so that they can hold on to their power forever. We may solve immortality, but who's to say it won't be incredibly expensive? So expensive that it's really only viable for a few people. A few people who are already rich and powerful and will just continue to be so rich and powerful as the years go on. There's already a precedent for this as we see the divide between rich and poor grow more and more each year. And this concept I've just explained is explored in depth in a very good Netflix series called Altered Carbon. Oh, the first season's good, anyway. Then we have our own motivations to consider. Assuming this leads us to a utopia and not a dystopia, humans wouldn't really have much reason to do anything anymore. Why do something today when you can do it tomorrow, or in a week, or in a year? I explored in my previous episode, the one on death and it being our birthright, that death is a great motivator. The reason why I go to work today is because I need to feed myself tonight. The reason why I create art today is because I want to share it with my friends and family before I'm gone. If I've got a year to just procrastinate and that year does not harm me in any way, shape or form, well, why won't I do it? I'm a pretty bad procrastinator even today, and I'm mortal at the moment as far as I know. And I waste valuable seconds, minutes, hours of my time, even though I know it's limited. Now imagine if I was immortal. Imagine that I had infinite hours to waste. I would not get anything done, and I think that's probably the case for most people. Without the motivation of death, we don't really have a reason to do anything. And as mentioned earlier, maybe this is why we're in a simulation, because our brains are just in complete sanitized stasis. We also have no idea what happens to the mind or consciousness if it lives longer than it should. Even nowadays, we fight mental illness as the elderly become trapped in their bodies and minds. And can our brains even handle storing so much memories? Is it a case that as we age, we just keep losing more and more? Would they get to a point in our immortal life where we don't remember being children? Would we live for so long that childhood becomes this myth that is told as a fun story, but it's not something that happened to us. I mean, sure, we'd have the records of it, but, who says we'd actually look at them? Speaking of children, why would we have children if we're immortal? We'd get to a point where the population just stagnates. Either that or we'd overpopulate. If we gain immortality before we have the technology to leave the planet, we might just end up overpopulating it if people are still having kids. And we currently have the issue where there's just a lot of stubborn old people who are taking a long time to die and putting a lot of strain on the resources of society. Sorry, I sound absolutely awful right now. In a purely pragmatic way, I'm not advocating for some kind of old people purge. Old people are great, some of them, but even now we've got aging populations as birth rates drop in developed nations, and you potentially have more old people than young people. Now, sure, in a society where we're all immortal, we're still all young, but there's no new minds being born, no new thinkers or dreamers. Once you've met everyone, that's everyone there is. You don't get to meet new people. And no new novel ideas are born because the unique brainwaves and patterns that make that person just never come to be. And what is a life sentence when the perpetrator is immortal? What if he's murdered someone? And if you murder an immortal, the loss of life is that much more impactful. Right now we can kind of shrug off deaths because they happen. That person was going to die anyway. It's tragic that it's come sooner, but we can't pretend like it was never going to happen. And when you kill an immortal, you have... they weren't going to die, and now you've killed them. What happens there? How many life sentences must one live? Do you keep them locked up so long that they forget their crime? That everyone forgets the crime? I don't know. And does immortality screw us out of our cosmic destiny? If religion is to be believed, we are not meant to be on Earth for longer than needed. What if this is some kind of universal law, and what happens if we break it? What if we look at Earth as a temporary consciousness trap, just a gravity well in the grand scheme of things as our consciousness whizzes past and decides it needs to have a look at what's going on this planet? What happens when that trap becomes more or less permanent? And finally, at the end of the day, even if we beat our own biological mortality, we are still living in a dying universe. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, our friend Entropy barges in and says, no. I don't have any hard or fast implications of this. I've discussed a lot in this episode about our eternal quest for immortality and how it might be a race to our demise, if not the death of the body, but the death of the spirit. Just the loss of the will to really live. We can take from that death should not be something that we're afraid of. It's gently pushing us to live. It's a great motivator. It's a mentor and a teacher. We should enjoy life while we have it and treat the life of those we interact with as precious as our own. And we should stop coveting something that we maybe shouldn't have. It's great to ease the suffering of the elderly and remove the fear of cancer and mental illness. But at what point do we stop? At what point do we accept that death is a fundamental part of the human experience? It's a one-in-a-lifetime opportunity that we all get to experience. And if you take that away from a human, is that wrong? Is that immoral? You can find millennials and Gen Z making jokes, sometimes it's not jokes, about not having their consent to being born. I didn't ask for this. No one asked me permission if I wanted to be born. What happens when you bring a life into the world and tell them that they will never die? Some people see death as the final big sleep, or that sleep itself is just death being shy. What happens when that promise of eternal rest just never comes to fruition? I think if we ever do get to the point where we need to seriously ask these questions, we need to think a lot more about the ethics of this than just the profits to be made, because I know that's where people are going to go. How can we make money off of this? So, yeah, immortality is nice to think about, but I don't think it's something we should be as obsessed with as our early ancestors, as the philosophers and the witches and the sorcerers. Just live your life and enjoy every second of it. And try not to procrastinate too much, but it's okay if you do a little bit, because it's not time wasted if you enjoyed wasting that time. So if you're going to procrastinate, do it in a fun way. Procrastinate with something fun. Okay, let's wrap up. Thank you for joining me on that journey. I have gotten a bit more freeform with the way I'm making these, and I see this is probably going to end up being my longest episode ever, so that's fun. I've been quite busy with work and also trying to jumpstart my career as an artist. No, I'm kidding. I'm just doing the art as a side hobby, but I enjoy it, and it's fun, and it's a way to get out all this conscious energy. So, speaking of that art, if you want to check it out, I'm on Instagram at David_Wellman. But otherwise, my fellow thinkers and dreamers, my seekers of truth and knowledge, I always appreciate you checking in. I've started to notice that I'm getting more views from Americans than from people in my own home country, which is kind of cool. Like, it means that people outside are starting to listen to the podcast, and not just the people I keep sharing it with and telling to go and listen. So if you're one of those people, thank you for listening. Please share it with your friends and your grandparents and your children and your colleagues and your schoolmates and whoever, and whatever platform you're on, subscribe or like it or leave comments. I'm always open to hear comments, criticism. Call me a dick. I don't care. I'll gladly be called a dick. And you can do that on the official subreddit, r/mindpalacemusings. Otherwise, we have the official Twitter, at mpm_podcast if you want updates when new episodes go out. And otherwise, yeah, details will be in the description. Thank you for listening. This has been Mind Palace Musings. I have been your host, David Wellman, and please stay curious.